We might as well, although we're not going to pay him, put Jason Scheer on our staff. He's done a remarkable job since we found him and saw some of the things that he has been doing, covering. Jason Scheer, again, Wildcat Authority, 247 Sports in Arizona, joins us, Sikkim 365 Radio. Jason, thanks for your time. Pac-12 Media Days coming up on Friday. Should be interesting. So after all of whatever was said, have you seen anything at all different from where we were Friday or even mid last week? Has there anything changed in your opinion?
Not really. I think it's all going to come down to the numbers. From what I understand, there was numbers that were given to school presidents and athletic directors last week, and they're pretty far off. Now, it's just a matter of, what the process looks like. Is it far off on purpose? And then ESPN tries to work with it. Is it far off because that's the offer? It's just a situation where it's got to kind of play out. And right now, I just think it's headed towards the window ending, and then the Pac-12 going with their television and media rights to the open market and seeing what it can get there as well.
So if this window ends, though, is that bad for the Pac-12 trying to stay together?
It definitely doesn't help. I don't know if it's the end of everything, but it definitely doesn't help, because what it means is that basically ESPN wasn't interested enough to pay right off the bat. And it would be the type of situation where, from what I understand, the Pac-12 is they have to get creative. So can they sign a deal with ESPN and then add a deal with like Hulu or Amazon or some kind of streaming to make up the difference in revenue? I think that's where we're headed, is maybe they will agree to some sort of lower offer, but the Pac-12 will kind of find unique ways to add more money to their pocket. So that the initial deal may not be as big, but they're going to get creative with Olympic sports and things like that in order to match it. But, if it was up to the Pac-12, admin and brass, they would have been done already and everything would have been secure, but it doesn't look like we're headed that way.
Jason, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you answered this last week when I said if Arizona could walk out the door right now or whenever that timeline would be, you felt like they would do it, but they would like to know who else might be walking out the door with them. Do you still feel that way, or even stronger?
Yeah, I still think it's a situation where I feel comfortable saying that the Arizona admin would like to be in the Big 12 right now. But, there's aspects to that at play. They don't want to go alone. If Utah comes with them, that would be probably the strongest option, is that, if Utah comes and says, we'll go to the Big 12 with you, that becomes a situation where I think they probably both jump at once. It's Arizona is going to need another school to go with it. I think they're willing to see if the Pac-12 can make it worth it for them to stay with a certain financial offer. But right now, let's say the negotiating window closed and the offers weren't coming in, Arizona would be gone. I think that they're probably the most active school from what I understand, what I've heard, and looking towards the Big 12 conversations like that.
Jason, a lot of what I've read and heard over the last week or so when it comes to, putting the shine on the Pac-12 and why they're in a strong position has to do with those late kickoffs, which I'm sure you've read plenty about that at this point. How much is that factoring into the strength or lack thereof in your eyes when it comes to the Pac-12, a TV deal, and where they sit right now?
Yeah, I think that basically what it comes down to is the general thought is that ESPN needs something to put into that time slot. And really the only conference that's available and worth it would be the Pac-12. And so people that support the Pac-12 basically think that ESPN is going to have no choice but to sign a deal with the conference and maybe even overpay a little bit in order to fill that time slot. It's interesting because most Pac-12 fans hate that time slot because we're watching games that go to midnight. Like it's nothing. Like every game I cover in Arizona for the first 2 months starts at 8 o'clock or even 8:30. It's brutal from a media perspective, but from a TV perspective, the thought is that, that could wind up being what saves the conference. It's the fact that ESPN's going to wonder how it can fill those time slots, and it'll keep coming back to the Pac-12 to the point where it might have to overpay a little bit, or the Pac-12 is going to have to accept a poor offer. The thing is, the Pac-12 can't accept a poor offer because the other schools aren't going to go for it. So if ESPN doesn't overpay a little bit because it wants a time slot, it won't really matter.
Yeah, Jason, you're preaching to the choir there. You don't have to tell us in the proliferation zone of the spread offense what 4-hour, 5-hour games can look like late at night. But we had a guest last week, Sean Keeler, who covers Colorado, and he said that the problem with Colorado maybe coming back is that the administration there views the Big 12 as a JUCO league. Do you feel that that is something that maybe has spread throughout some of the other teams in the conference about how they feel about the Big 12 and potentially joining it?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a group of schools in the conference that feel that way. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's a JUCO league, but, I absolutely think that there's schools in the conference that kind of, they're arrogant. And that's kind of why the Pac-12 is here in the first place. I mean, the Pac-12 could have expanded years ago and basically decided it didn't need to. And their schools, Washington, Oregon, Colorado appears to be one of them, and that basically think they're better than the Big 12. That's staying together in the Pac-10 or whatever it may be, with the academics and all that. They should make an argument where they're better than the Big 12. And there's other schools like in Arizona that feel like, hey, there's benefits to the Big 12 as well. But I absolutely think it's a thought process, and it's fractured the conference, because I think you have schools that are like, no, the Big 12 is great, and you have other schools that are saying we're not going anywhere. And when you have that situation, you have a bunch of school presidents and athletic directors that just aren't on the same page right now.
Hey, Jason, I had mentioned something, a report earlier from over the weekend about how the California system was going to withhold any kind of dollars on UCLA travel. But I keep getting this, that they don't even rely on California state funds, that all of their athletics are funded by their own. They do it all on their own. So I don't know, you saw that where they would not help anything towards UCLA playing games on the road against the Big Ten. That must just be politics, because they don't even use that money.
It's all politics right now. I mean, no one's stopping UCLA from moving. Maybe they make it a little more difficult and the PR campaign, and maybe they try to do some subsidizing with Cal, but I would be absolutely shocked if anything came out of that. With UCLA, maybe they'll lose a little bit of a PR campaign within the state, but it's all political right now. And, I don't think UCLA is as worried about it as maybe some articles claim, because it's not going to stop the ruins. I'd be really, really surprised if it came down to that.
Yeah. Wouldn't they have considered that before they made the decision?
Yeah. I mean, if they thought it would be blocked, they would have gone the more public route. I mean, they're opening themselves up to lawsuits and all that, where if they felt it was a possibility, they would have gone a different route. But obviously they're pretty confident in how they play things out and the fact that they're able to make this move. And at the end of the day, they'll show the difference in pay, and that'll be the end of the conversation, because they're making a considerable amount more than they would have had they stayed in the conference.
Jason, what do you think the climate or mood will be on Friday at Pac-12 Media Days?
I think a lot of it is how the Pac-12 handles it. Do they come out swinging? Do they attack the Big 12? The Big 12 had a PR campaign. Normark got up there and said, we're open for business. Does the Pac-12 say something similar? Do they go on the offensive? Do they go on the defensive? Do they try to focus it, just the football? It's going to be interesting for sure. I think it all depends on how, the Pac-12 commission handles the questions to the media, which are going to be pretty direct. If he goes in the offensive, I think that's probably what I would do in that situation. But you just don't know. They've been pretty quiet beyond some, campaign wars basically that started today with different writers and kind of putting out the Pac-12 as a better product. But I think they control that a little bit. But it's going to be interesting, because I think USC and UCLA obviously this is the first time where they're really going to have to answer some questions. And same with the Pac-12 commish. So it's definitely going to be kind of heated in a way, not like angry or anything like that, but they're going to have to answer questions that they haven't had to answer yet.
You know what? So when do you think Arizona announces they're leaving? Like when that starts on Friday? Just kidding. Just
if you were going, yeah, you would announce it then, because the heat's all going to be on USC and UCLA. I think it's going to play out a little bit longer, but that would be really funny if they announced it on like Thursday night and then come to media day the next day.
How much do you watch? There's a lot out there, and you've even made comments today about, it's interesting how a couple of different columnists had columns basically the same thing today. That could be just timing. It could be something that was not planned. It just could be, I don't know, what it's like. How much are you getting feedback from others because you've kind of been ahead of the forefront on all this?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, like always with this stuff, is there's so much on Twitter and out there, and there's numbers, and you got to look at make sure numbers are reliable, and then you got to say, is this person, coming from a certain perspective? And, I get a lot of feedback, and there's people that believe me, and there's people that don't. And I think that a part of it is, especially in the Pac-12, you kind of believe what you want to believe. Like, there's people kind of going back to what we said, like the Pac-12 is a better conference, and anything that doesn't paint the Pac-12 as better is going to be looked down upon. And the Big 12 loves their conference, and anything that doesn't paint the Big 12 as better is going to be looked down upon. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. It's interesting in the last few days, you get Pac-12 and Big 12 fans kind of going at it about which conference is the best. And there's some schools that are like, we want out, and there's other schools that are saying we're good, and eventually we'll get paid. But it's a lot of feedback from people just on, what's right and what's wrong and what's better for each school involved. And the reality is there's not a lot of people that know, and even I don't know every single conversation that's going on in these rooms and where it stands. And I think that's the frustrating part for a lot of people is this one, the way it's playing out, seems to be much more public than the other two because USC and UCLA were gone. Texas and Oklahoma even wasn't this public, and this seems to be much more public because that's the way that kind of college football is headed.
We have heard, you've said it, that the number, or at least it appears the number that might be back to them, if in fact that's official, is not anywhere near what they hoped it would be, obviously with USC and UCLA leaving. What is that number, Jason? Do you know?
Yeah, so the number that I heard last week from a few people was 24.5, which is brutal. It's not even close to being good enough. I would say if the Pac-12 wants to keep schools involved, it's got to be closer to lower 30s as a starting point. Now, again, it could be a situation where ESPN did that on purpose. That could be the offer. We don't really know. It could be a low offer, and then the Pac-12 adds, other sources to raise that amount, which I think is probably the most likely situation. But the initial ESPN offer that I've heard is 24.5, and that absolutely won't come close to keeping the conference alive.
Jason, just for everybody out there who hasn't followed this super closely and knows all the details, what is kind of the timeline here, in terms of like the exclusive negotiating window opened up and you're referring to that, but where does all of the rest of the timeline kind of sit at this point?
Yeah, so August 4th is the window. I would be kind of surprised if they came to an agreement before then. And then after that, it's kind of all hands on deck. Like there is really no timeline. And this is a thing where, the Pac-12 could kind of wait to see what happens with other schools. Maybe they say, Notre Dame's got to decide in the next year or whatever it may be. It could absolutely go on for a year. It'll end because you got to figure out what your future is by then. But I don't think it'll last a year, but it could, because after that negotiation window, there's really not a hard deadline for these schools involved. They may just say, let's play the football season, and after that, we'll kind of reassess everything. So there's nothing imminent unless it's really quiet. There's nothing imminent right now, and it is absolutely a possibility that this thing plays on for weeks and months.
Thank you, Jason, for a lot of what you've been the last 2 or 3 weeks with us, and hopefully in the future when we get this thing tied up in a bow, although that might be asking for too much. Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. We have today at 4 o'clock North Texas football coach Seth